Badass of the Week is produced by High Five Content.
From the safety of an impregnable castle atop the fortress city of Carmona, high above the Spanish plains, the beleaguered defenders of Al-Andalus stare down the mountain at the vast army that has been besieging them for months. While his men watch, 26-year-old Prince Abd al-Rahman ibn Muawiyah ibn Hisham, the Falcon of Al-Andalus, starts a bonfire just inside the castle gates. Then he draws his scimitar, an ordinary blade that in no way reflects his royal standing, and throws the scabbard into the burning fire. The meaning is obvious. He has no intention of sheathing his blade again. This will be the prince's final battle.
Let us throw our scabbards into the flame and swear to fall like soldiers if victory cannot be ours. We conquer or die.
As one, all 700 of his men draw their weapons and throw their sheaths into the fire as well. They move to mount their horses for one final epic charge. The final battle for control of Spain is about to begin. Hello, and welcome back to Badass of the Week, the show where we tell the badass history of badasses. My name is Ben Thompson, and I am joined today by my co-host, Dr. Pat Larish. And Pat, you seem slightly more relaxed than usual, like a weight has been lifted from you as we're doing this recording today.
Yes, indeed. The semester is over, and I am officially in summer mode. Woo-hoo. So, yeah. Doesn't mean I get to relax, because all of the household projects that I've been meaning to do, I now have to do.
Mm-hmm.
But
that makes sense.
But it's the summer. I don't have to grade.
Yes. And that's exciting. And we've been kind of working on our recording schedule for the summer because I feel like we're going to get to have more episodes with you now that you have a little bit of a break, which would be nice because it's always great to have you help me tell these stories. We were looking through a list of who we could talk about over the summer and who we needed to start doing our research on. We got together about a month ago to start talking about that. And there was one story that jumped out to you because it involved a location that you either are planning to visit, I think, or have visited recently.
Planning to visit. Yeah, I am hoping to make it to Spain at some point in the near-ish future. And I would love to go to Cordoba. Yeah.
All right. So yeah, Cordoba we had a character, we have a person we're going to talk about today who is from there. And Cordoba is one of these interesting places that, I had just come back from Portugal, and you see some of this in Portugal as well, where you have influence from the medieval era, the Catholic churches and things like that, from dating back to Reconquista, stuff like that. But there is even an even older presence there from Islamic control of the region. So you'll see stuff like that in Portugal, but Cordoba was a central component of the emirate that was part of Iberia at the time. And so I'd love to go see it as well, because I feel like there's going to be so many cool buildings and structures and ancient history to see there.
Yeah. The great mosque cathedral, Mezquita Catedral of Cordoba, is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and I'm actually going to talk about it a little bit later.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Because it's related to our character that we're going to talk about today.
It is.
This is a good story. And so this is a story that kind of passed a little bit into legend among the people of that were living in Muslim Spain for many hundreds of years, and still do today. But he's a big hero in that area, in Cordoba and in the surrounding areas. And the story that we're gonna tell is one that is, you get it's generally told with more detail than you see in some of these some historical stories of historical figures, because this is like action adventure car chases. He kind of comes across like an action hero in some of the things we're going to read today.
Yeah, and he's also not just an action hero, but also an important cultural hero.
Yes, exactly. You were talking about the World Heritage Site. It was built by Abd al-Rahman, who is the person we're going to talk about today. He was the first emir of the Cordoba Emirate. And in addition to having this kind of wild backstory that we're going to get into of him kind of, it's a story of revenge and running and like a chase sequence. And, and then it ends with him becoming this kind of really important cultural figure for hundreds of years, to the degree where when we talk about Abd al-Rahman, it's one of these scenarios that we see a lot on Badass of the Week, where the guy is like so well known and beloved that many rulers that follow him take the same name so that they can kind of capitalize on the name recognition. There's a lot of Ramseses, and as we will see in Cordoba and in Muslim Spain, we're going to see more than one Abd al-Rahman as well, which is good for Abd al-Rahman's credibility, but it's good for, like, it speaks well to him, but it also makes it sometimes a little complicated to research him, because you have to try to parse which one they're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, we've seen that in other royal families too. So
absolutely, there's 15 Louis of France and 16, I guess, and
500,000 Mithridateses.
All the Mithridateses.
Maybe not 500,000, but it felt like it.
Several Henrys and Georges in England. We'll see all this sort of thing. And there's going to be several Abd al-Rahmans as well. And when we come back from our break, we are going to find out why this guy, who is probably less well known to our listeners than the Louis and Henrys and Georges of history, merited such a, dynasty of badass name recognition. So we'll be right back, and we're going to tell the story of the founding of the Emirate of Cordoba. All right, welcome back. We are going to start our story today in the year 750 CE. And we are a little bit outside of Damascus. And we are kind of zooming in on a character. He's 20 years old. He's a young prince. His father is the Caliph of the Umayyad dynasty, who is the supreme temporal ruler of the Islamic world. But this young prince is kind of relaxing at an oasis with his brother and his wife and his little kid, and he's kind of living a good life. He's living at he's royalty in a region that, at this time in history, is one of the largest, most powerful, wealthiest, and most technologically advanced civilizations on Earth.
Yeah, this is the Umayyad dynasty, and it was the dynasty that ruled the Islamic Caliphate from 1661 to 750. And the term caliph means, Ben, you and I were talking about this earlier, it's not quite the same thing as king, although in function, okay, you've got a guy leading an empire. The term means successor, as in the first caliph was actually the successor to Muhammad, the messenger of God. And then the second caliph was the successor to the successor, and then,
And then they decided they wanted to stop saying, like, because I think the second caliph he said, the first guy was like, I'm the successor to Muhammad, or was declared successor to Muhammad. And then the next guy was declared successor to the successor of Muhammad. And then by the third one, they were like, we're just going to go with successor. We'll just call it caliph. That's it. Or khalifa, you'll see sometimes.
Yeah, so it becomes a job title.
And he's functionally, he's like, it's more than just the king. So he's the ruler he's the political leader, but he's also the religious leader. So it's like a king and a pope kind of together.
Actually, yeah. So the Umayyad dynasty derived their authority from Uthman, who is one of the four companions of Muhammad, who became one of the original four caliphs after Muhammad's death in 632. And Their capital was Damascus, Syria, as you've mentioned, and they launched many conquests from there. And at its height, the Umayyad Caliphate encompassed all of North Africa, known as Ifriqiya, and the Maghreb, parts of Central Asia, Transoxiana, if you're taking notes, parts of modern-day Uzbekistan and Tajikistan, Sindh, which is in modern-day Pakistan, and important for today's episode, Al-Andalus, which we today call the Iberian Peninsula, Portugal and Spain. And if you look at that on a map, that's like 4.3 million square miles of area. That's pretty big.
Right. It's huge. And when you're looking at this, so Muhammad, in 750, Muhammad has been dead for about 120 years. And you've had these they're called the four rightly guided caliphs. They are the first four caliphs after him. And the religion is spreading, the kingdom is spreading, the empire is spreading. And you have battles where you'll have Umayyad armies fighting Visigoths in Spain. And you also have Umayyads fighting the Tang dynasty in China on the border with Pakistan. So that's the stretch that we're talking about here. And it's important to know at this time that this was a very wealthy civilization and very technologically advanced. Huge advancements in math, science, architecture, astronomy. Not astrology, I don't know if that's a real science, but it's astronomy for sure.
I think astrology was... astrology was a practice. It was a study, and it inspired a lot of astronomical observations.
I guess that's true, huh?
So
you do have to observe the stars for it, and so you do end up with some astronomy that kind of comes out of that.
Yeah, and then whatever you make of it, that's you in your cultural context. But yes, as far as astronomy, mathematics, engineering, yeah.
And so by 750, this is if it's not the most powerful civilization on Earth, it's one of them. It's top three, right? And we have those four rightly guided caliphs. That's what they're known as in history. But once we get to caliph number 5, there starts to be a little bit of succession issue, a little bit of dispute. The four rightly guided caliphs were not dynastic. They were not passed. The title was not passed down as you see with kings to the brother or the son or the whatever, not passed down through the family line. But once you get to number 5, the Umayyads do that. So they start passing down through family members. So our guy, Abd al-Rahman, he's the grandson of the caliph, which means he's not next in line, but he's in the line. He's pretty high up in the line of succession here. And that doesn't always work for everybody. We have a little bit of a schism when we get into some succession issues here. And this is where we get a divide. You've probably, if you're not super familiar with this, you've probably heard the term Shiite and Sunni Muslim. There's a lot of complicated differences between them, but one of the beginnings of the schism comes from arguments over succession, the line of succession. Now, the Umayyads are in power in 750. But there is they're Sunni, and there is a Shia challenger to the caliphate in 750 who thinks, who's arguing that maybe I should be in charge. His name is Abu al-Abbas, and he is known as the Bloodletter.
Okay. Sounds pretty badass.
Sounds pretty badass. This guy was not. This guy was serious. This guy's a serious dude. He did not come by that nickname lightly.
Yeah. So he's saying that he should be caliph, and he's getting his authority. He's deriving his authority from a different one of the rightly guided caliphs. Mm-hmm. And I guess in political terms, I guess that's kind of how this split started. Right.
It's a succession dispute.
It's a succession dispute.
It's more complicated than that, but for the purposes of this story, that's what we're going to go with.
Yeah. And so this dispute turns into an out-and-out rebellion, which starts all the way at what we're considering the other end of the empire, since ultimately we're thinking of ourselves in Cordoba. But all the way at the other end of the empire, in Khorasan by the Caspian Sea, this is a region that is part of modern-day Iran, Afghanistan, Turkmenistan. And there had been civil wars bubbling up throughout the empire, and the Abbasids took the opportunity to gather together various groups. And they had grievances. It wasn't just about succession. And they used those grievances to unite various groups. One of the grievances was that there was discrimination against people who were practicing Muslims, but who weren't ethnically Arabs.
Because you have this huge empire that encompasses people from all over the place. And, you know, we don't, we call this the Arab world or the Muslim world, but it's not all Arabs. It's people from Turkmenistan, it's people from Afghanistan, Pakistan, like that are not from Arabia, from like traditionally Arab areas.
There was burdensome taxation. That's always going to get people activated. And also they said that some of the Umayyad rulers were behaving badly in a non-righteous way.
Another thing you see with like growing empires, you know, building the empire is one thing. And then as you start to maintain it, maybe they didn't love the idea that this Prince Abd al-Rahman was relaxing in an oasis in this very wealthy, very nice palace while they were, you know, kind of working hard and fighting in wars and things.
Yeah. And there's this guy, Abu Muslim Khorasani, who was a leader of the rebellion, and his forces finally defeated the Umayyad Caliph named Marwan II in 750 at the Battle of the Zab. This is the Zab River in modern-day Iraq. And on our mental map that we're imagining, this is happening all the way over there on the east, on the right-hand side. But remember that we've got the whole rest of the map. You know, we've got Syria with Damascus, the capital, and then eventually we're going to be talking about Spain. So
yes. And so at this little palace outside of Damascus, I'm picturing like a swimming pool kind of thing, right? But we've got Abd al-Rahman. He's there with his family. He's 20. His grandfather is the caliph. There is disturbances, but in Damascus, things are pretty good right now. The Umayyad army has marched out to meet this rebel. These Abbasids that are out on the fringe, they're coming out of Iran or wherever. It's not, don't worry about it. It'll be fine. Where the Umayyads will be good. And so Abd al-Rahman is hanging out with his family. He's got a 4-year-old son. He's got his 13-year-old brother, and he's got his wife with him. And they're all hanging out and having a nice day in the sun when there is the sounds of screaming and fighting and armor and weapons. And from the location that they are hanging out, they look down onto the plain and they can see the city of Damascus out there, and they can see an army approaching, and there's fighting and there's fire and there's smoke and there's clouds of dust from the horses. And kind of, you can almost feel like his moment where it's like, this is something seriously bad is happening. And this is when he realizes, oh, the Abbasids defeated my grandfather. They've defeated the caliph in battle. That's unbelievable, but they've done it. And now they're here. They're marching on Damascus. They're entering the city gates, and they're starting to set everything on fire and burn the city and loot it. Okay, so he's on this oasis. He's looking down. He's joined by a guy named Badr, and Badr is I kind of always think of him as like Race Bannon from Johnny Quest. He's like the bodyguard. So I'm picturing kind of like a big guy with a beard and a scimitar, and he kind of runs out and he's like, Prince, we got to get you out of here. Like, this is bad. We got to go. So they need to leave. So what are they going to do? So they hide. So Abd al-Rahman's wife and his son, they're not going to be able to ride as fast as they need to go. Well, we gotta go. We can't be dragging this 4-year-old around with us. So they disguise them as commoners, and they hide them among the people of the little town there. And the two brothers, they got to go. So Badr and the two brothers, they get on their horses and they start to ride. And the Abbasids know that this palace is up here and they're coming for it, and they send a detachment of horsemen after them, and they come up, they kind of bust through the palace. Our guys are riding away. This is the chase sequence we were talking about. I'm picturing them kind of riding down a mountain, jumping over, fallen trees and stuff, running through, streams and things. And at some point they get to the Euphrates River, which is a big big river. They find like a slightly narrower part of it, but they head for the Euphrates. They get there. The Abbasid horsemen are behind them, chasing them. Okay, we can't get the horses across. Get off the horses, jump. We're going to swim for it. So Badr and Abd al-Rahman and Abd al-Rahman's little brother, they jump off into the water and they start to swim for it. Now, Badr makes it across. Abd al-Rahman makes it across. But the 13-year-old, the little brother, he starts to get caught up in the current. And they try to go back for him. They can't go back for him. He's only about halfway through. The Abbasid horsemen on the far side of the river, they stop, they get off their horses, and they come to the edge of the river, and they've got sticks and ropes and stuff. And they're like, hey, buddy, come back to us. Like, you don't drown yourself. Come back here. We'll help you. It'll be fine. It's going to be all right. Come back to us. So it was much easier to go back than it was to go forward. The little brother comes back to these guys. They pull him out of the water, and they cut his head off. And they throw his body into the river. Yeah, while Abd al-Rahman and Badr are watching, they cut his head off and throw his body into the river, put his head on a stick, and they'll end up parading it around Damascus.
This is not the first time in this podcast that we've had a head paraded around on a stick.
Yeah, that seems like a pretty common... Man, you would never want to go back in time, I feel like.
No,
I would never want to go back in history. You don't see that quite as often anymore.
Yeah. On the other hand, I suppose if you're playing along with Badass Bingo, you can check that off. Your bingo card.
Head on a stick. Yeah. Now we know that this Badass of the Week occurs somewhere between 300 and 1500 AD.
Okay. Yeah. I'm glad to say it's no longer a common practice.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But
we're
that's
talking
about history. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So R.I.P. Rahman's little brother, but Abd al-Rahman himself and Badr the bodyguard are safe on the other side of the river.
They take off. They find more horses. They take off running. But as they're running, the city of Damascus is burning behind them. The Abbasids completely destroy the Umayyad line. They've killed the little brother. They sack Damascus, they burn it, they plunder it, they kill anybody associated with the Umayyad Caliphate. They kill Abd al-Rahman's father, his mom, other family members, uncles and aunts. They dig up the royal tombs and pull out dead Umayyads and burn their corpses and scatter the ashes to the winds. And then they rewrite the history books to omit them, like damnatio memoria. Rewrite the history books to write these guys out of it. So complete annihilation of the Umayyad line to like a molecular level.
Do they find his wife and kid? Do they find the 4-year-old?
No, they don't. So they remain hidden. And that's good.
No spoilers.
Yeah, no spoilers. But as of right now, they do not get captured and are still alive.
Okay, in disguise as commoners.
Yes.
Okay.
So, they're kind of, the bloodletter is kind of going through his kill list here. And he's like, his list of enemies. And he's like, all right, we got these guys. There's one guy left that we didn't get. There's this grandson, Abd al-Rahman. We got to get him. Where is he? Oh, he took off this way. He took off across North Africa. He took off west. We're going to send horsemen to the west. And we're going to find him. So they send horsemen to the west to go look for him. And now Abd al-Rahman and Badr the bodyguard are on the run. They are running across North Africa on horseback and on foot, by wagon cart. They're wearing disguises. They have no money except for what they were carrying with them when they ran away. They don't want to ask anybody for help because if he reveals himself as who he is, could be death. If anybody has any Abbasid sympathies or knows a guy who is an Abbasid spy, you're going to be in trouble.
Or if you're just a random bandit.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And you could just sell him out for the reward money. And so these two guys travel through Palestine, Syria, Arabia, Egypt, and Libya. And there's bounty hunters, there's assassins, there's Abbasid horsemen. Everybody's coming after him. Everybody's looking for him.
Yeah.
And so where does he go? He goes to Morocco.
Wow.
Because
so
Abd al-Rahman.
So he's gone all the way across North Africa.
Yes. It takes 5 years. Spends 5 years on the run across North Africa. It's all the way to the far western, because like you said, the rebellion started in the east. He's going to go west. Okay. So his mother, Abd al-Rahman's mother, is Berber, which is the people of Morocco. And he goes and finds them. and reveals himself to the Berbers, who don't have any Abbasid leanings. And he goes and lives basically on the edge of the Sahara Desert for a little while, trying to gain support.
With his mom's people, yeah. The Berbers these days are referred to as Amazigh. They're an indigenous ethnic group who had been living in North Africa since at least 2000 BCE. So, Ben, as you said, Morocco, and also Algeria, Libya, some of Tunisia, Mauritania, northern Mali. And in fact, an Amazigh or Berber dynasty founded Timbuktu. Shout out to our badass librarians. Northern Niger. And also, today there are even communities in Burkina Faso and in Egypt. They started converting to Islam in the 8th century.
And you had mentioned music. There was, what was it, Desert Blues?
Yeah.
Listen to the music of... I still have some of that on my playlists.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Abd al-Rahman is among the Berbers, and they're his mother's people. They are not Abbasid friendly. So
what's he going to do? Where are you going to go now? The Abbasids... They take over. There are no more Umayyads except for Abd al-Rahman. The Abbasids are in charge. They have now seized control of the empire, and they are ruling it. It's been 5 years now. They are like well in control of everything that's going on in the empire. So this guy's existence is a problem for them, and they need to find him and get him. He's 25 years old, and he's traveling with his bodyguard, and he is able to rally some support. He gets about 300 horsemen with him, which would be useful in like a street fight, but maybe not in a like battle
against
scenario
against
thousands of horsemen and spearmen and things. Okay, so what's he going to do? So we have been talking about Al-Andalus, and the listeners from the beginning, you'll know that this is kind of where the story is going. And he's like, okay, Al-Andalus is Muslim Spain, so basically southern Spain at this point. And they have always been kind of loyal to the Umayyads. And so Abd al-Rahman decides that's where I'm going to go. I'm going to cross over the Strait of Gibraltar, which he does in August 755. And there's not a lot of support for the Abbasids here. They like the Umayyads. And he decides this is where I'm going to try to make my stand. I've got to do something. I can't just run forever. I've got to uphold like my duty of becoming I've got to like uphold the honor of my family. I've got to do something here. So he crosses the Strait of Gibraltar with 300 men in August 755 and decides he is going to try to make a move.
So the Moorish conquest of Spain, of the Iberian Peninsula, was only a few decades old by 755. And before the Moors got there, the Iberian Peninsula had been under the control of the Visigoths. Their empire had been based out of Toulouse in France, and they were Christian. But along comes the Umayyad Caliphate under Al-Walid I and his commander, Tariq ibn Ziyad. And in the year 711, they bring a force of about 1,700 troops from North Africa across the Strait of Gibraltar, which wasn't called that yet, and starts what we now know as the Moorish conquest. And Gibraltar is actually named after Jabal Tariq, which is the Arabic for the mountain of Tariq, which is this general who's leading this conquest.
Oh, I didn't know that. So Gibraltar is named for Tariq ibn Ziyad. Jabal is the word for mountain. So yeah, Tariq ibn Ziyad. And I think I do want to talk about him at some point because the Moorish invasion of Spain is very interesting. And there's a whole story here that I'd love to get into. But one thing that I love about him is that, Al-Walid I is an Umayyad Caliph. This is 40 years earlier in our story. But Tariq ibn Ziyad crosses the Strait of Gibraltar, I guess names it after himself. This is another thing on badass like bingo. Is there a formation, some kind of natural formation named after our character? Yes. We had Magellan not too long ago. I'm doing another one later pretty soon about somebody else who has a mountain named after them. And he crosses this body of water with his ships and his 1,700 men. He disembarks the ships, and then he orders, as all his army is all arrayed there, he orders that the ships all be set on fire and burned. And as the ships are there burning in the harbor, his men are kind of looking at him, and he looks at them and he's like, we can never go back. We can't go back. So now we have to win this war. We have to conquer the people that are here. We have to defeat these Visigoths because we have no escape. That's it. Let's go. And he ends up, and we heard in the cold open for this show, that's kind of what Abd al-Rahman is going to do as well. With his
same
men.
Vibe.
Yeah.
So Tariq ibn Ziyad notches up victories. He's joined by his commanding officers with more forces. They move northward up through the Iberian Peninsula. And the Visigoths are realizing that, okay, they're toast. And in 713, one of the Visigothic counts offers a conditional surrender. And in 715, the general Abd-al-Aziz ibn Musa is appointed the first governor of Al-Andalus, operating out of Sevilla. And the Umayyads keep going on. And by 719, they've gotten as far as Barcelona and Narbonne in southern France. Things get a little hairy for the Umayyads in the 740s when the Berbers revolt. But the Umayyads managed to basically control the peninsula. And that's kind of where things are and why.
Yeah, that brings us to 750 when Abd al-Rahman arrives in Al-Andalus. He's known as al-Dakhil, which means the immigrant. And when he shows up, like you said, the Visigoths, they don't get massacred and conquered and all of that. They do make a deal with the Umayyad Caliphate. And in response to that, the Umayyads give positions of power to Visigoth leaders. So one thing you see in the Islamic expansion that isn't quite as common in the Crusades, whereas, in some of the European kingdoms, they'll just kill everybody and put their own guys. Hey, you get this part of land, you get this part of land, you get this part of the land. But with one of the things that made the Islamic expansion so rapid was they could say, you're still the leader here, but now you're Muslim. And, that's okay. Or in some cases, they didn't even have to become Muslim. They could stay Christian, but like you pay your taxes to us now. If you're not going to be Muslim, you just have to pay a little bit more taxes.
I believe there was a certain type of tax that was levied only on non-Muslims.
Right. Exactly. So you didn't have to convert, but if you didn't convert, there was a tax. You could pay more taxes or you could convert. You had two options. But you have when Abd al-Rahman arrives, he has these guys who very recently in the last 20 years, 30 years, pledged allegiance to his line of Umayyad caliphs and got a pretty good deal and still got to keep their castles and still got to keep their money and their armies and their fancy tapestries or whatever. So there's loyalty to the Umayyads here. And there is an Abbasid in charge, but he is coming from the eastern side of the empire, which is far away and does not have the relationships that the Umayyads have been building for the last couple of decades. So there's not a lot of love for this new Abbasid governor who shows up and is taken over. And when al-Dakhil, the immigrant, arrives and says, hey, I am the rightful heir to the Umayyad Caliphate. I'm Abd al-Rahman. Join me. Let's get these Abbasids out of here. There's some support for him. He's got his 300 guys, but he builds support pretty quickly, and he attacks the commander of the Abbasid Caliphate in Al-Andalus, who's based out of Cordoba, which is what we've been talking about. The governor of Cordoba rides out to attack, and he's met by Abd al-Rahman and his combined army of like Visigoths and Berbers and loyal Moors, loyal Arabs, loyal followers.
Sounds formidable.
Yes, Abd al-Rahman wins the battle. He defeats the governor of Cordoba, then cuts his head off and mounts it on the walls of the city. So more heads on pikes.
Yeah, I mean, not being paraded around, but still very, very publicly visible.
Yes,
and,
mounted up there. Yeah, you want to know want to know what we think of the Abbasids here.
Yes, yeah, which is a bit of a contrast to the way the Umayyads generally treat people, which is, hey, let's work with the people we have here.
Sure,
as you were describing.
And Abd al-Rahman is gonna do some pretty violent and bloody and gruesome things as we go through the story. Yeah. But you do have to remember they did kill his grandpa, his dad, his mom. They murdered his little brother in front of him. They dug up like his dead his dead great grandparents and set their corpses on fire. Like this is a little bit of a revenge story here.
Oh yeah. This is a context where violence is a thing.
Yes, he is pretty upset about all of this and is ready to fight. And word of what's going on gets out. He announces himself, I am the successor to the Umayyad dynasty. Word gets back to Abu al-Abbas, the Bloodletter, the new caliph of the Abbasid Caliphate. Your governor's dead. His head's been mounted on the walls. And we found that guy we were looking for. He's now commanding a castle in Spain. Cool. The Bloodletter does not like this. He is not ready to lose Spain, which is a very wealthy contributor to the empire, to a guy that comes from a line that Abu al-Abbas hates so badly that he burned the dead bodies of people who are already dead. So Abu al-Abbas does the Bloodletter thing, and he's going to raise an army, and he's going to attack Al-Andalus, and he's going to try to destroy Abd al-Rahman before he can rally more support, because there is still some support for these Umayyads. There is some support for these guys, and when word gets out, Sunni Muslims start moving to Al-Andalus, start heading that way to see if they can join this guy. We have a civil war brewing, and the Abbasids need to clamp that down before it gets going. So they form an army, and they march for Spain. We are going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we are going to find out what happens in this ultimate showdown.
Abd al-Rahman is in Cordoba. He's managed to gather up a lot of support as he's the last of the Umayyads. But Abu al-Abbas, the Bloodletter, is on his way with troops.
Yes. The Abbasids attack, and they are led not by the Bloodletter, but by a general named Al-Ala ibn Muqith al-Judhami. He's the local governor. He's going to be the replacement for the guy whose head's currently on the wall of Cordoba. He attacks at the head of a large army and defeats the Umayyad defenders in the field. The Umayyads march out to face him. They're defeated. They're driven back. And they're driven back to a place called Carmona, which Al-Ala ibn Muqith al-Judhami then lays siege to.
Yeah, Carmona, it's about 62 miles from Cordoba. Maybe, if I'm doing these calculations right, an hour and a half by horse, if you are going with the upper end of a horse's speed.
Okay. That's pretty close. It actually is fairly close to Seville. We were looking on a map.
Yeah, it's closer to Seville, yeah.
And so we are, this is called the Fortress City. It's on the top of a mountain. It's a castle. It's the best spot to defend if you're Abd al-Rahman. He's not going to try to hold, he's got 700 horsemen with him and some infantry. We don't know the numbers on the Abbasid army, but it's big. It's way bigger than what Abd al-Rahman and the Umayyads have. So numbers range somewhere in the 7,000 range. We're going to say comfortably that Abd al-Rahman is outnumbered at least 5 to 1, probably 10 to 1.
I think that's safe to say.
Yeah. And so he's got to defend something, right? So he finds this fortress city up in the mountains, and he doesn't have the troops to defend Cordoba. He doesn't have the numbers to do that yet. The Abbasids are trying to crush him before he can build his defenses up. And so he gets his guys together, and he has them in this mountain fortress, which the Abbasids lay siege to. They cut off food, they cut off water, they start to kind of plunder the countryside and block any kind of aid from coming in. Any of these people we were talking about who thought, oh, well, the Umayyads are back, I'd love to go join them. They're being intercepted and redirected away from joining the Umayyad army. And this is going to be the Abbasids' best opportunity to destroy Abd al-Rahman once and for all. He's holed up here. He's got 700 cavalry and some spearmen and archers and things. But his army it's a very multinational empire, but he has a very multinational army as well. He's got Arabs from Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Syria. He's got the North African Moroccans, African Moors. His own personal bodyguard is Visigoths, who are generally described, his personal bodyguard described as blonde-haired, blue-eyed warriors who the Visigoths kind of come from Eastern Europe, were settled in in Spain from Eastern Europe during like the times of the late Roman Empire. And he, some of these guys who are in his bodyguard are guys who had served the Umayyads before. They had been kind of enslaved, but had been freed from slavery to serve in the military. And so they are now serving under Abd al-Rahman, who we see this sometimes. We see this with the Varangian Guard, where the Emperor of Byzantium trusted the Vikings to watch his back a lot more than he trusted other Byzantines. And so I feel like we see
because they were probably free from local complicated entanglements and relationships and loyalties.
Right, exactly. You only need one guy in your bodyguard to disagree with you politically and stab you in the back. So in order to avoid that, I think Abd al-Rahman chose Visigoths, who he could more count on their loyalty. Okay, so he's surrounded. He's under siege. He's running out of food. He is 26 years old. He's got 700 men, and he's facing 7,000. What are you going to do? He's like, all right, we can't just sit here and starve to death. It's the same thing as it's the same choice that was presented to him when he first arrived in Al-Andalus. I can do nothing, or I can do something and maybe fail. Okay. So he decides we're going to do something. He gets those 700 horsemen together, and he starts this bonfire in the town square in front of the gates of Carmona. And his sword is nothing super fancy. He's got this kind of ordinary sword. He pulls it out of its sheath and he throws the scabbard into the bonfire, basically saying and these are pretty sharp swords. You got to be careful with these things, right? You need to to store them in a scabbard or you're going to cut yourself. So the idea here is, I am not going to put this thing back into my sheath. I'm going to fight until I die, or the war ends, or whatever. Like, this is it. We're not going to wait any longer. We're not going to need this anymore. We're going to fight.
Yeah, this has got vibes of burning the ships.
Exactly.
So you can't go back. There's no going back.
There's no going back. Where are you going to put this sword? You're going to just lay it down on the ground? You can't do that. You can't just set it on the counter. Somebody's going to cut themselves. You can't stick it in your belt like you're going to cut your belt.
Yeah. Okay, so we are committed.
We're committed. He doesn't have a flag because he hasn't been in charge for very long. His family, the rebellion was 6 years ago, and he has been in Spain for less than a year. And so he doesn't have a flag. His guys aren't wearing matching armor. They're not wearing a uniform of any kind. He has a green banner that's tied to a spear. And that spear is held by a descendant of a guy named Khalid ibn al-Walid, who was the sword of Islam. We'll talk about Khalid. I'm sure we'll do Khalid at some point on this show, but he was he was kind of the military commander under the Prophet Muhammad, the main guy, kind of, who in a lot of ways was responsible for the Muslim victories in the early stages of the expansion. Okay, Khalid's a real badass, just big, giant, strong, very, very powerful, very berserker battle rage kind of guy. His descendant is holding this green banner tied to a lance. The Abbasids use a black flag, and the Umayyads use a green flag. So that's all they've got. All right, he gets his guys together. He lines them up into a cavalry wedge, and the Abbasid army, they are on the slope of a hill. So they are at somewhere between they're a pretty steep decline here, looking up at the fortress castle, right? The fortress is on top of a mountain, big castle walls. I'm picturing Game of Thrones kind of stuff here, but big castle on top of a hill. The Abbasid army is camping, and they've been camping for months here. It's not they've been, all their job is to just kind of watch the walls, make sure nothing happens. Every once in a while they launch a little probing attack or something, but for the most part they kind of just camp outside of arrow range. They'll launch catapults every once in a while at the city to try to hit it with some rocks, and mostly they're just going to wait to starve these guys out. So they're not really prepared when the portcullis suddenly cranks open and this wedge of like screaming cavalry guys with their swords and their lances come flying out at a dead charge.
Cavalry guys.
Yes, 700 horses. And this is a pretty narrow pass here. So even though the Abbasid army is big, they're kind of funneled down into this choke point. And the Umayyads start charging down with Abd al-Rahman and the grandson of Khalid ibn al-Walid. They start charging down, and I'm sure Badr was there as well. They charge down the hill at a dead gallop. And the front lines of these Abbasid guys who are sitting there having their boring siege, I think like a police stakeout. They're just kind of sitting there waiting to see what happens.
Yeah.
And they're just like, they don't even have time to get their weapons before these I like to think that as the portcullis is going up, these guys are already at a gallop. So when they come out, it's just like a cannon, you know? They're already at full acceleration when they come through the gates. And
they're going downhill.
And cavalry is very effective against infantry in any scenario, but especially if the infantry is not armed and some of them don't get their armor on in time, they don't get their weapons on in time. The front line of the Abbasid force is smashed, and they start to run backwards into their own guys who are still camped on the hill. But now all of a sudden we have this situation where these terrified guys are running through the formation, being chased by horsemen. And as the attack is starting to go, Abd al-Rahman is like, I think we've got them. Let's go. Let's keep going. And they keep riding down the hill into the camp, where first they ride past the frontline soldiers, then they ride past like the catapults, and the catapult crews are running for their lives or being killed. And then they ride right into the main tents of the camp and find like where all the generals of the Abbasid army are. And they ride through all these tents. Everything's kind of on fire. People are being chopped up left and right or whatever. Anybody who tries to surrender to Abd al-Rahman, they just kill him because there's no quarter. That's the kind of war we're talking about here. Anybody who runs doesn't get very far because they're not going to outrun a horse. The generals of all of the entire general staff of the Abbasid army is captured, and including Al-Ala, the main commander who was going to be the new governor of Cordoba. There are claims that the entire enemy force was killed. That doesn't seem possible. It doesn't seem possible that these horsemen, every single horseman in Abd al-Rahman's army would kill 10 guys or 100 or whatever.
Yeah.
But the army,
but still.
Yes, the army is destroyed. Anybody, they flee for their lives, and it's the end of the Abbasid force in Al-Andalus. Abd al-Rahman gets a cool nickname. That's another badass bingo thing. He's known now as the Falcon of Al-Andalus, which I like.
Oh, yeah. It's a good name. Yeah. The Falcon of Al-Andalus.
The Falcon of Al-Andalus. And he will be, you've mentioned this before, like he will be later known throughout his reign as being a good and like righteous and just ruler. He is known for like being merciful and, treating people well. And like you said, prisoners and enemy forces and stuff. He generally has a reputation of being a very, for 8th century Europe, being more or less pretty cool to his enemies. But these Abbasids, they don't really get that. They don't really get that that leniency. He's pretty mad at these guys. He's been on this revenge kick. He's been thinking for 6 years about how they murdered literally his entire family. And so what does he do with these captured generals? Well, he beheads all of them, including Al-Ala. He tags their ears with their names. So like you would tag like an animal, like catch and release, like if you were going to study it. Puts a little tag on their ears with their names on it so you know who they are. Puts the heads into a big bag of salt to preserve them. And then puts them into small bags with salt. And then has his spies sneak across into North Africa where, so the bloodletter at this point, Abu Abbas, the bloodletter, he's died. And he's been replaced by his brother, who is the new caliph, the Abbasid caliph, Al-Mansur. Al-Mansur, part of his just recently taking over the caliphate thing. He wants to go on the Hajj. He wants to go on the pilgrimage to Mecca. And so he's working on the Hajj. He's moving his way through his empire to observe his empire, but also to do the thing that all good Muslims are supposed to do. And Abd al-Rahman figures out what town al-Mansur is currently visiting. He has his spies sneak into that town in the middle of the night and throw these head bags all over the place in the city, so that when al-Mansur wakes up the next day, he's finding the heads, him and his men are finding the heads of all their generals wrapped in salt in bags throughout the city.
Oh, wow. That's grisly.
It's grisly. Yeah. Yeah. This is you would never want to go back in time.
No.
So when all these heads are brought before Caliph al-Mansur, they're all kind of explained what's happening to him. He is quoted as saying, "Praise be to Allah for placing a sea between me and such a demon." Referring to the Mediterranean and Abd al-Rahman, who is clearly insane now. So al-Mansur does the rational thing here. What do you do in this scenario if you're al-Mansur? You could create another army and attack this guy again and start this like never-ending blood feud war that will, engulf Al-Andalus and the Abbasid Caliphate. But he doesn't really want to do that. Al-Mansur, he's more of a builder than a warrior. And he, Abu al-Abbas, the bloodletter, is the one who kind of leads the revolution and takes over and installs the Abbasid Caliphate. But al-Mansur is the guy who makes it the sort of thing that will last for hundreds of years. He starts establishing laws and order and rules, and he's a good administrator. He's a good ruler. He's a competent politician. He doesn't see the point in getting thousands of his men killed trying to fight over this little piece of land. Yeah. He's like, all right, all right, Abd al-Rahman, you got it. You do your thing. You do you. I'll leave you alone. I don't want to deal with this anymore. I don't want any more heads in bags. That was really unpleasant. So Abd al-Rahman becomes, he's clever enough. He does not declare himself the Caliph of Cordoba, because that word has, then you're creating like a Pope, anti-Pope scenario or something. It borders on, I don't want to say blasphemy, but like that's too charged of a name. If he declared himself Caliph, there would be a war. Al-Mansur could not allow that to stand. And Abd al-Rahman, while he has won this battle, he only has 700 guys. He's still building. He doesn't want a war any more than the Abbasids do. He's got his revenge as far as he's concerned. He cut these guys' heads off, threw them in bags. Okay, I'm good. Let's just call it even. Truce. You killed my family. I killed your generals. And so he sets up, he calls himself the emir of Al-Andalus. And so he sets up the emirate of Cordoba. Umayyad supporters from across the Abbasid Caliphate move there to join Abd al-Rahman. His wife and son come to visit, which is great. They're alive. They stayed alive. They make their way out there. They come and find him. His son is 10 by this point. He's missed several years of his life, but he has him, and his son will succeed him. And the Abd al-Rahman will rule as emir of Spain for 32 years. At one point, he builds it up. At one point, he builds his civilization up so much that Charlemagne attacks him. Charlemagne invades Spain while Abd al-Rahman is in charge. I don't know if you're familiar with the Song of Roland. But that's
this is the context for that.
Yeah, that's the context for that. They were trying to fight. Okay. Charlemagne was attacking Abd al-Rahman, and as he was pulling out, the Basques ambushed their rear guard, and that's where the Song of Roland comes from. We'll probably talk about that on the show at some point too. I feel like we have to do Charlemagne at some point, so maybe we'll get more into that. But if you're coming back to listen to this from a future episode about Charlemagne, welcome. We're glad to have you. I'm happy to know that we're still making these episodes in the future.
Yes,
but yes, so he. Abd al-Rahman rules for 32 years and becomes this, what we talked about. He becomes known as this great cultural hero. And you mentioned that he builds builds a library with 400,000 tomes, apparently. And he also builds the Great Mosque of Cordoba.
So the Great Mosque of Cordoba, in Spanish, it's the Mezquita Catedral of Cordoba, the Mosque Cathedral. So he started, at least the current manifestation of it, for comparison, Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris was started in 1163, so this predates that by several centuries. And the site had been used for something for quite some time. In the Roman era, some people think it may have been the site of a temple to Janus, but some people think maybe that was just a misinterpretation of an inscription on a milestone, because the word Janus can mean gate, whatever. Anyway, whatever was there, when the Visigoths took over, they converted it into a church in 572. And then when the Umayyads took over, it became a mosque. And so there was a mosque there, but then in the 8th century, under Abd al-Rahman, we see this huge building program. 300 mosques, also palaces and public buildings. He wants Cordoba to rival other major capitals of the time. So he's looking at Constantinople, he's looking at Damascus, he's looking at Baghdad. He's saying, okay, we're one of those. And the Great Mosque was started in the year 786 and took about a year to complete, which strikes me as being really quick.
Yeah, because Notre Dame was under construction for like 100 years or something, right?
Yeah.
Although Notre Dame this is before Notre Dame. Notre Dame's later.
This is, yeah. So they reused a lot of existing materials. So they didn't have to quarry a lot of new stuff. They could just, and so if you look at, say, the columns inside the mosque, a lot of them are Visigothic or Roman, actually, in origin. And the work crew, the craftsmen, probably included a mix of people from the Iberian Peninsula as well as people from Syria. The original mosque was probably a square, roughly a square, side 74 meters or 79 meters per side. And now the floor plan, the footprint is, what we have is about 180 by 130 meters. So it's roughly 4 times as big in a square area. And it's renowned for its size, not just the floor plan, but also the height of its ceilings. And architecturally, it combines both Western and Eastern artistic elements. And it's innovative in Islamic architecture because it uses double arches to support the roof. And this is literally one arch on top of another. And that's a technique that was adapted from Roman and Visigothic architecture. And you may have seen pictures of this. These are the famous horseshoe arches. You'll see 2 columns, and over them, kind of a semicircle, but it's actually more than a semicircle. It's like 3/4 of a circle.
I'm looking at pictures of it now as we're talking about this, and it's wild.
Yeah.
Like the scale of this great mosque is, I was picturing like a big church, right? But it takes up like multiple city blocks. There's walls, there's towers, there's parapets, there's and the double arches you're talking about, they're all painted. They're all painted like yellow and red and orange, like stripes and stuff. This is wild. I definitely encourage you to look up the Great Mosque of Cordoba, because not only is this an amazing feat of architecture and design, but to remember that it was built 400 years before Notre Dame. Like this built in the 700s when, it's hard to kind of grasp how advanced the technology and the civilization was at this time period compared to what else was going on in Europe at the time.
Yeah. And those columns with the arches coming out of them may have been designed to remind Abd al-Rahman of the palm trees back home in Syria.
He did. He wanted to pull as much of that back as he could, because he liked being in Spain, but he wanted to bring Syria back with him and make it feel like home.
Yeah. So he combines his Syrian heritage with the stuff that for him is new, which is the Visigothic and the Roman architecture. I feel like that's emblematic of what happens in Al-Andalus culturally. There's a lot of mingling of cultures, a lot of blending of cultures. And the Great Mosque of Cordoba, some of its architectural features then go on to influence later architecture.
Which we'll see throughout the Middle Ages, but even today, you still see
Yeah.
new mansions are being built that are trying to incorporate architecture from Arab Spain.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And there are also later renovations and additions, and some of what happens in later after Abd al-Rahman. Some of the later renovations to the Great Mosque go on to influence Gothic architecture in Europe. So it's a beautiful example of merging Islamic architecture with local styles and techniques. In the 13th century, this is the Reconquista, it gets turned into a cathedral because then you have Christian powers in charge.
Sure, but it says something that, like, a lot of times during the Reconquista, they would knock the old building down and build a new one. And with this one, they were like, this is actually pretty awesome. Let's put some crosses up in here. It'll be fine.
Yeah. Just slap a few stickers over some things.
Yeah.
And there are orange trees growing in the courtyard. And these were originally imported from Syria. And it's, I don't know that the orange trees themselves are from the time of Abd al-Rahman, but they're kind of emblematic of the fact that he had a lot of plant life from Syria, from Damascus, imported into Spain.
And there are things we think about as being Spanish these days, right? You think, Spain has orange trees. And it's like, well, they have orange trees because Abd al-Rahman imported them in the 700s. And yes, they have had orange trees for 1,000 years, but it's that's where they came from. So it's not around for maybe the Visigoths or the Romans. So that's Abd al-Rahman. He sets up Al-Andalus. He sets up the Emirate of Cordoba, it will be called, because remember, we don't want to call it a caliphate because that's too contentious. But it's the Emirate of Cordoba, and the Emirate will stay for the next 250 years. He rules for 38, and his dynasty lasts. There's multiple Abd al-Rahmans that follow him as emirs. And Spain becomes this beacon of learning and art. The people that live there, they get running water, they get paved roads, public baths, lighted streets. These are all things that a lot of Europe didn't have in the year 750. He encourages growth in math, science, and art. And he sets up Al-Andalus. Like we said, it's somewhat more inclusive than the rest of medieval Europe at the time, because you could be Christian or Muslim or Jewish or whatever in his realm. You had to pay the non-Muslim tax, but it was not illegal. And he when he dies in 788, he's like the first in line of emirs that will rule for the next 250 years. His buddies, the Abbasids, or his enemies, the Abbasids.
His buddies.
Yeah. They also do pretty well for themselves. They rule until 1517. So they're around for like 700 years as the main caliphate of the Islamic world. But from 750 on, when you start seeing maps of Europe and North Africa and the Middle East, there is a little different colored glob in southern Spain, and that is the Emirate of Cordoba, and that is the work of Abd al-Rahman on his quest for survival, which becomes a quest for vengeance, which becomes civilization building, and creating his kingdom into a beacon of learning and art in the world. So that's our guy. That's Abd al-Rahman. Complicated badass.
Yeah.
So, okay. Well, thank you guys so much for listening to the episode. Pat, thank you so much for helping me tell it. We have some, I feel like this was a really fun episode. I mean, fun kind of relative because we have a lot of severed heads flying around all over the place and like dead children and stuff. But like, yes, I feel like when you go to Cordoba in the next couple of years, I think it'll be really interesting to see some of the work of Abd al-Rahman that still remains today.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you guys so much for listening. We do this every week. If you like it, please come back for more. There's a ton of episodes in our feed, and there will be more every week. We keep doing this, and we love your support, and we love hearing from you guys. So please do like and subscribe and leave us good comments and all of that stuff. We always appreciate it. Thank you so much, and we will see you on the next episode.
Stay badass.
Badass of the Week is produced by High Five Content. Executive producers are me, Ben Thompson, Dr. Patricia Larish, and Andrew Jacobs. Writing is by me and Pat. Story editing by Ian Jacobs. Mixing and music and sound design by Jude Brewer. Special thanks to Noel Brown at iHeartRadio. Badass of the Week is based on my website, badassoftheweek.com, where you can read all sorts of stories about other badasses. If you want to reach out with questions or ideas, you can email us at badasspodcast@badassoftheweek.com. If you like this podcast, please subscribe, follow, listen, and tell your friends and tell your enemies. And please leave us a rating. We'll be back next week with another one.